Hey, everybody. Hey, I start off with what is now, I believe, my fourth entry on this matter of Mike McDaniel, the now new head coach of the Miami Dolphins, who was the offensive coordinator with San Francisco 49ers, and this matter of his blackness, uh, with this response to a column written by Mike. Right over here, I'm going to get his post right here. As you can see, Mike Freeman's column in the USA Today, where he writes an opinion that new Dolphins coach Mike McDaniel doesn't owe anyone explanation about his blackness. And before I respond verbally, let me read for you what Mike wrote in the USA Today of February 8th of 2022. And I will scroll down, and it is also linked to in the text. Can't stand when this happens. This is very sensitive, by the way, because it tries to get you. Oops, excuse me. Let me try that again because there it is. All right, let's try that again. Sorry, dealing with a rather interestingly sensitive. There, okay? Right here, got it. He starts with, in February for Black History Month, USA Today Sports is publishing the series 28 Stories in 28 Days. We examine the issues, challenges, and opportunities Black athletes, and here I'm reading from what Mike wrote, Black athletes and sports officials continue to face after the nation's reckoning on race 2 years ago, which I question is just that, but in referring to the George Floyd murder. This is what Mike wrote. When I saw that Mike McDaniel was hired as Miami Dolphins coach and the scary, ugly racial twist the hire started to take on social media, the first person, Mike writes, I thought it was my daughter. The McDaniel hire and subsequent conversations focused on a central question: what is Black? And it comes at a time in American history when race is everything. It's always been everything, but the influence of the white nationalist former president is still strong. He inspired a group of mostly white supremacists to storm the Capitol. Not coincidentally, hate crimes have risen in recent years. In other words, the uglier parts of racism are making a comeback, like the hockey mask wearing Jason from Friday the 13th. It is not impossible to put the McDaniel story in this context. As for my girl, she is a dream of a daughter, smart, funny, and stunningly good athlete. My daughter, like McDaniel, is biracial, and she looks white, with straight blondish hair and blue eyes. Her looks, combined with my dark black skin, have led to some staggeringly racist moments when we're in public, since apparently people don't know how genetics work. Once a white woman thought I was her babysitter, another thought I was her driver. Are you her chauffeur? She asked. Just recently, she was on a play date with one of her friends. The friend was driven to it by her grandmother, who, when seeing me hug my daughter and to say to her, have fun, had a horrified look on her face. Who are you? The grandmother asked. I'm her father. I said, who are you? It goes on. She awkwardly tried to laugh it off while I didn't crack a smile. Again, racism is so strong in our society that it blinds people's common sense and ability to comprehend what melanin is. My daughter looks white. We often talk about her Black ancestry, with her asking questions, making her own observations, and a back and forth with my emphasis on having pride in her Blackness. We talk race often, and she will not be someone who passes. A light-skinned biracial person who can pass as white and does to avoid the stinging and destructive impact of racism. Which brings me to McDaniel. After his imminent hiring was reported, there was a great deal of skepticism and, frankly, vitriol centered on a 2021 interview in which McDaniel said his grandmother and father are Black. The insinuation, in some cases, the direct accusation was that McDaniel had spent much of his coaching career passing as a white man and didn't experience the same career difficulties and racism that biracial or black coaches do. In other words, many people, including people I greatly respect, and mostly black people, were basically saying McDaniel wasn't black enough. Or in worse cases, they were saying he needed to prove his blackness. It is some of the most violent, disgraceful things I've seen on social media, and that's saying something. There are even people questioning the compensatory picks the 49ers will receive from the league, 2 third-rounders, for developing a minority assistant coach under the Rooney Rule. The tinfoil hat belief is that the 49ers are getting picks for someone who isn't really black. Quote, I've never seen anyone in sports have to prove they were biracial, multiracial before, tweeted Omar Kelly, columnist for the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Usually people just accept it or don't discuss it. This is a sad time in this country. He's right. I guess we need to start doing DNA and ancestry tests, he added. Very disappointing, and it's more my people I'm disappointed in than anyone. He's right again. When things go wildly astray, is the assumption McDaniel has spent his life passing, refusing to acknowledge his blackness until he was sight of a head coaching job. Let me say that again. When things go wildly astray is the assumption, where things go wildly astray is the assumption, Mike writes, that McDaniel has spent his life passing, refusing to acknowledge his blackness until he was in sight of an NFL head coaching job. There's a problem with this theory. We don't know if it's true. McDaniel may have talked about his racial dynamics with coaches or players on past teams. The fact he was biracial may have been known. Just because the nature of his race wasn't discussed on CNN doesn't mean he was hiding it. Again, there's another complicated layer. If he was hiding his blackness, he was wrong, incredibly wrong. That shouldn't prevent him from getting an NFL head coaching position or the 49ers from getting those draft picks. Again, we never asked for light-skinned biracial brother ID cards before. Why now? I'll take it McDaniel at his word. The people questioning it don't know him, and questioning him is cheap. McDaniel doesn't know anyone any explanation about his blackness. Normally, what people say on Twitter doesn't necessarily warrant a reaction, but this is different. Race is America's original sin, remains a plague, and was worsened by Donald Trump. The way to address racism, whether it's Trump's or anyone else's, is to directly confront it. Now, anyone who says McDaniel's story and the story of race in America isn't complicated is someone you should never listen to again. It is immensely complex, in part because of the NFL, which historically and now handles issues of race with great putridity. That's part of the issue here. And I get it, because the NFL is completely untrustworthy on issues of race. It's why former Dolphins head coach Brian Flores is suing the league. Quote, your world is kind of changed when you consistently start to understand what race is in general, McDaniel said in that interview last year. I remember one particular day walking around, all of a sudden noticing that, hey, I'm the only fair-skinned person in all these picture frames. My grandmother on my dad's side is black. My dad's black. I can honestly say up to that point, I hadn't noticed that I was different in two fields. I was different in that I was multiracial to the world. But even within my own family, I was different from them. I was just kind of a unicorn. Now he's a head coach, a biracial one. Put away your DNA tests. Now, here's why I take powerful issue to what Mike wrote. And in a very powerful issue. First of all, I don't know how old Mike is, but I think it reflects almost a passing of generations. I'll be 60 this year, and I grew up at a time when, among other things, Spike Lee's School Days was a controversial yet, in a number of cases, well-received piece on what it meant to be a dark-skinned African-American, or what in the movie was called a jigaboo, versus a light-skinned African-American or a wannabe. The cultural rub and controversy between dark-skinned African-Americans and light-skinned African-Americans is age-old. Why? Because light-skinned African-Americans and those who did look white could pass. I don't care what Mike says or anyone else. Mike McDaniel looks white. And this comes in the middle of what I believe is the real problem that Mike Freeman completely misses in his deeply personal take. Mike was so busy focusing on his daughter and the fact that he's black, and I suppose his white is wife, his wife is white, fine, who cares, that he missed. He really just he missed what the real point is, the real problem. He touches on it, and then he just avoids it just as quickly because he doesn't really know, or somehow forgot, because he was so thinking about his daughter and how his daughter's looks were responded to by the outside world, as well as his own experiences in an interracial marriage. I get it. But the fact of the matter is this, Mike, that all of this was started because the Miami Dolphins strategically chose to hire a person who looks like a white guy, but they can say is biracial. Mike McDaniel never said he was black. The second part of this problem is that other media have said, like Jenna Lane was getting after me, who was at ESPN a few days ago, that he is black. Mike McDaniel has never himself said he is black. When the Dolphins introduced him as a hire, they didn't introduce Mr. McDaniel as an offensive genius. They didn't say what offensive wrinkle he created that he should be known for. That was not the headline. That wasn't even the subheading. What was? That he's biracial. So the Miami Dolphins set the tone for this entire conversation, Mike. Again, the Miami Dolphins set the tone for a race conversation by trying to deliberately muddle the argument by offering up Mike McDaniel. No one bothered to ask why McDaniel surfaced out of, for example, a conversation that could have included Lovie Smith, who's far more qualified than Mike McDaniel. The Dolphins could have hired Lovie Smith and got Pep Hamilton as offensive coordinator, just as is the case for the Texans. But they didn't do that. The Dolphins happened to do it, I contend, because they were in the middle of a lawsuit, didn't like the fact that their head coach was suing them for being racist, and wanted to not only prove him wrong in their mind, but prove in their mind that the conversation of who black is in and of itself shouldn't be done. It's so confusing. We're going to offer somebody to confuse it. That was what they tried to do. And it backfired. What they did was they poured it in the middle of a media environment that is 70% represented by white people, mostly men, by far, and a handful of black folks, an even smaller handful of African Americans who control their own media platforms and own them, as I do, well, 68%. And then they expected that because some of these folks wanted to maintain some favor with the Dolphins and the NFL, that they had to basically walk a fine line in discussing this if they were going to address it at all. And when they did, they were far more often desirous of saying something in support of the Dolphins rather than attacking their actions, whereas I attacked their actions. And for good reason. I'm not the only one. Stephen A. Smith did too. Because the question is this, and it's age old. We are in a situation where people who are recognizably black are being discriminated against in hiring. That is the problem. You cannot get rid of the problem by offering up someone who is the grand picture of the problem of passing. And then, by the way, say, well, it's okay because his father is black, only to look at his photo and then learn that his father is really one half black himself. That's right. Mike McDaniel's father is one half black. He is not entirely black. He is one half black, which means that Mr. McDaniel, Mike, the new head coach of the Dolphins, is only 1/4 black. Again, this entire situation of this conversation that you, Mike, do not like was done by the Dolphins. However, in your column, in this great piece that you wrote, all right, down here, that I just went to read, all right, you did not note at all. And I'm trying to scroll it. It's not scrolling with me. There it is. Okay. You say peel away your DNA test. All right. But you did not note, Mike, at all in your column, at all. You did not attach any blame for this on the lapse of the Miami Dolphins. You didn't do it. Okay. You let them off the hook. All right. You told them to put away, you told everybody else, you got after black folks. Very easy for us to get after each other, okay? But you didn't get after the organization that started the conversation. Why? Why did you leave the Miami Dolphins off the hook? Why did you let the Miami Dolphins, basically, because you let them off the hook, why did you let the Miami Dolphins govern this conversation? Look, you say new Dolphins coach Mike McDaniel doesn't owe anyone an explanation about his blackness, but the Miami Dolphins do. Mike McDaniel didn't write the press release. This isn't about Mike McDaniel's character. This is about the Miami Dolphins character in the middle of a lawsuit regarding their dislike, apparently, of advancing a person who produced 2 winning seasons for them, Brian Flores, and reportedly didn't want to advance him because he got in an argument with he wanted more power. Sounds like a Hugh Jackson issue between Hugh and Reggie McKenzie, who is employed, I believe, by the Dolphins. Was Reggie involved in this too? My Lord. Okay. So, Mr. Freeman, you completely missed the boat. Literally. No pun intended. You completely missed the boat. Why were you so afraid? Hey, Patrick, how you doing? Patrick and Blackman, one of our fans. Why were you so afraid to attack the Dolphins? You didn't do it. Yet you should have. Because again, the Dolphins set up this conversation by offering up Mr. McDaniel. I am a blogger and a video blogger. I am not a journalist. So I find it interesting and somewhat disturbing that those of you who take a lot of your time calling yourselves journalists don't act like journalists and actually do some digging, take the red pill, and try to find out the real answer to the question. Why are you afraid? Because you're afraid you're going to lose access with the Dolphins? So effectively, you're afraid because your payment, which is access, is going to stop. Wow. And some of you get after me for doing for-profit media. Gotcha. No way. No way would I do that. We have a serious problem here. We never had that reckoning on race. We never had that conversation. Why? Because of the advent of social media and the internet, which puts us at a distance, not together talking face-to-face over coffee in a relaxed atmosphere where we have time to understand each other, listen, respond, adjust, and come out with better relationships. That's not what these environments provide, particularly not Twitter. Reading something in two-dimensional text is not the way to go. Talking to someone is. But also understanding when an organization like the Dolphins is in a position where they get taken action and we as media react to it. So always ask the question, Mr. Freeman, what is it that the Dolphins want me to respond to and why? Why did they set up this? Because again, Mike McDaniel was not introduced as an offensive genius. He was not introduced with the term guru or genius, okay? they were not introduced. They did not introduce Mr. McDaniel that way at all. 415 exit says the 49ers were smart ones. They received 2 third-round picks for a guy that didn't call any plays. Thank you. Again, didn't call any plays, right? And so by his being selected, you're telling me he's better than Eric Bieniemy, who's called his plays? Okay. And this gets to a work that my friend and your colleague, Jared Bell, wrote for USA Today, which found that a number of media people, NFL media people, had a, if you will, habit of presenting black head coaching candidates in such a way where their negatives were offered up for consumption, but not their positives. Whereas someone white, you never hear about their negatives. Let's take the case of Bieniemy, if we can, just for a moment, and I'll come back to my central point. The knock on Bieniemy that's put out on Twitter all the time is, well, he's got a rap sheet. A rap sheet, okay? That's the knock on Eric Bieniemy. Well, he's got a rap sheet. Do you know who else has a rap sheet that has a job? Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel has been arrested not once, not twice, but 3 times. Mike Vrabel was arrested because he confused the number of beers on a bar tab he forgot to pay. Mike Vrabel was arrested for beating someone up in a parking lot. I can go on. Mike Vrabel, in his younger years, i.e., 13 years ago plus, was, as we say, a wild and crazy guy. But hey, he's white, so it's okay. It's okay. Oh, Matt Patricia, Lions head coach. And then it just so happened that after he was named head coach, it was suddenly discovered that he had a sexual assault case against him. Now, how was it that all of this happened not to make it to the media while he was being considered? There are a vast number of white coaches that have rap sheets that get jobs in the NFL and in college. Some of them revealed in the USA Today study, but not all. But no one bothers to look back and say, hey, look, how many black folks are you trying to bury that have lesser criminal problems, if any at all, just allegations, and yet they get tossed aside because some person in the media, generally white, tends to use their platform to make that person look bad because they're black. Because when the person's white, there's always an excuse made. Let me give you another example. The great Titans offensive tackle Taylor Lewan, who, after his Michigan Wolverines lost to Ohio State, was pissed off and went after a couple of other obnoxious fans, Ohio State fans, of course, because they were, well, being jerks. He beat them to a pulp. Got cited and arrested before the draft. Mr. Lewan walked into the press reading room at Radio City Music Hall in Detroit. No one asked him about the arrest. No one asked him about these reports that he had a temper at the time like Richie Incognito. There was only one person in the room who dare raise that question, and that's the guy you're looking at. Why? Because after covering the NFL draft to that point since 2005, I got sick of seeing and essentially allowing by my presence this pattern to continue where anyone African-American who was a player candidate got into trouble, the white press asked them, but if the person were white, the white press acted like, well, they're not going to ask the questions. I changed that. Taylor didn't like it, but it wasn't about Taylor. It was about the pattern. I have nothing against Taylor Lewan. I simply gave him the same treatment that you're the black candidate. would receive, which really is the same treatment that any candidate should receive if they did something that was legally wrong and it showed up in print. Blaine Gabbert was made to look out like he was a choir boy. But in 2010, he was detained in front of a bar. That made one publication, a very small publication in a very small town in Missouri. That's it. Okay? In the middle of the media looking for stuff and information about him, how is it that they all could, miss that and I didn't? This is a gigantic problem, Mike Freeman. This is the consistent habit of the media. The NFL media representatives, for the most part, using their platforms to make white people look good and black people look bad. There is no reason why Eric Bieniemy should be sitting out there consistently interviewing for a job, and yet people vomit up his rap sheet, but Mike Vrabel has a long rap sheet. He gets a job anyway. And so does John Gruden, who, I might add, got a DUI when he was Raiders head coach. I represented the mayor of Oakland at the time. I started to call him and say, hey, man, is there anything you need? Because I'd actually happened to meet him at the Raiders party earlier that year. I like John to this day. We all make mistakes. But to hold a person's mistake over their heads because they're black, in and of itself, should be considered criminal when you're not doing it to someone white. And that is what is going on here. That is what is going on here. And so what's the difference? All the people that I'm talking about look black. Mr. McDaniel does not. And there is a reason. He said it himself. He sort of just discovered the black side of his family. And if you take his statements another way, he's never had to feel the pain of how society responds to him as a black person because he's not black. In the same way that other people who came from a black family and background in full. In other words, where they had a father who was, say, fully black, the conversation was there, they didn't have to guess at their backgrounds or anything, right? They knew they could pass as white. They were mad about it and let it be known. They would talk about it with their families. They would talk about their efforts to right the ship. Mike McDaniel has not done that. And the Dolphins offered him up. Now, are we to deny Mike McDaniel the job? Of course not. But let's be real about the situation. Mike, you say that you're basically ashamed that my black folks have brought this up. I mean, come on. I'm ashamed that you are afraid to criticize a system, okay, that produces this. Instead of calling it out, you're afraid to attack it. You use it to attack other black people. As Johnny Guitar Watson would say, ain't that a bitch? It's very common for one black person who tries to defend the system that has been good to them to attack another black person who attacks the system. Oh, joy. That's pretty novel, huh? Not. Take the red pill, Mike. Look at the situation for what it really is. Blame the Dolphins for doing this in the middle of the Brian Flores lawsuit. Blame them for trying to play a game. And then look at the situation and take not one red pill, but two. This is yet another example of attempted racism against people who are demonstrably black. And I remind you, Mike McDaniel was never introduced as a genius or a guru or the creator of the next great offensive system. Hey, I got one, the Eagle offense for the NFL. Okay, I got my playbook. Where is his? I created mine all on my own. Sent it to the Raiders. They even used a play. All right. Where's Mike's? I don't know. Okay. I'm just curious. Okay. I'm curious to know where his genius level is, I'm not saying that I'm a genius, but I'm curious to know where his innovation is. Say what? It's a pitchback? I mean, come on. David Shaw and Stanford was doing that with Ty Montgomery back in 2014. All right. So where is it? I am curious to know. Inquiring minds want to know. Where is it? Where is it? Okay. You say, okay, Zinni, show me what you've done. And I would say, I'd be delighted to. All right. I'd be absolutely delighted to present to you my Eagle offense for the NFL. My wrinkle, my 4x1 wrinkle, my proud 4x1 offensive wrinkle, as I call it. I'll be delighted to show you that. Absolutely. I even would be so delighted to show you that I actually think maybe I can possibly introduce it right now. In fact, there it is. That's one of the plays for my Eagle offense for the NFL. All right. Point. There are black folks around who are really into football. I've drawn plays like this since I was 16 years old. This is a whole playbook. The Raiders have it. And again, used the formation, although not the H motion across, which is really the staple. This is the staple play. This is a play that's based on my love for and obsession with the 2007 New England Patriots offense that was basically a one and done. Brady set records with it. They almost ran the table. And then you never saw the offense again. That was it. Well, this is my effort to, in a sense, revive it, but then tweak it a bit with the recognition that, you need basically a second, and that's it, to get rid of the ball. In this offense, that's what we engineer you to do. This is a fast offense. If it were used, it would be the fastest in the NFL if used with a no-huddle system, which I call for. And this is not the only play. There are 71 plays. I'm about to add some more. Similarly, very hybrid and a very unusual design. Oh, and my goodness, I haven't even begun to install my pre-shift system. This is about football, okay? This is about great coaches, great schemes, and great approaches. Don't get it twisted by trying to maintain a desire to ignore people because they're black. This is Black History Month, Mr. Freeman. Respect that. Subscribe to Zinni62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com. Thank you.